Hi there, I'm Deanna Morrow. I'm Senior National Account Manager with TCI, and I'd like to welcome you to this edweb.net webinar today on high quality instructional materials for deeper learning in social studies. I am super excited. I have two experts that are going to be joining us today. I have Jennifer Smith, who is a social studies coordinator and middle school instructional coach from Blue Valley School District. And I have Dr. Maureen Scanlon, coordinator of instructional projects from Seminole County, Florida. So, super excited that they're here to help us learn about high quality instructional materials for deeper learning. This is going to be a very informative webinar, but it's going to really kind of run like a podcast. So we're going to have a lot of discussion and dialogue. So we're going to talk about the ABCs of HQIM, unpacking high quality instructional materials. So we're going to cover what are HQIM, why do HQIM matter, HQIM in social studies specifically, and then we're going to have a panelist discussion. So in the chat, what I'd like for you to think about is across the country, this is a newer topic for social studies. And I want you to think about where you belong on the spectrum of what you already know about HQIM. So this is going to be a two-step process. So if you are a zero, you don't even know what those letters mean, you're going to put a zero. And if you are a 1 through a 5 is I could do my state, I could help my state write their state rubric, put a 5, and then tell me what you know about HQIM already. So you could say, I'm a 3 and I know it's an evaluation system, or I know that M stands for materials. So I see a 5, a lot of zeros and ones. I have a 1, Troy. I see that you know what it stands for. That's great. Is a 3, so some zeros. So we're kind of more at the left on my screen. It's left side of the spectrum of maybe not knowing that much about it. And like I said, it is relatively new for social studies. And so, if you know what the letters stand for, that's a plus. And then I do see that Frank has a good understanding of the evidence based curriculum. And so, yes, that is going to be an element of it. So, HQIM does stand for high quality instructional materials. And the trend around the country is to promote high quality instructional materials, although it's always been part of what we've wanted to do in evaluating materials. This is a little bit more specific and outlines things for teachers and districts. Um, so the question icon is going to be at the top of the screen above my photos. So somebody can't see the slides, just refresh your screen. But one of there have been a number of studies with Rand and John Hopkins, and the information that's been released is saying that 90% of teachers are going to the internet to find resources or are trying to create their own materials. So when we think of that number, like 90% is a significant amount of teachers. I mean, on any given day, are there 90% of teachers even in their classrooms? I mean, it's just such a high number to get that many teachers to do the same thing. It's really challenging. We're such a diverse group of people. So 90% is extremely high, in my opinion. But what that means is how many hours do you think, and you can put this in chat, how many average hours per week do teachers spend searching for instructional materials on the internet? 12, 12, 10, 20, 10, 12, 8, 15, 8, 8, 15. Those are some 3.75. That is hilarious. 5, 12, 14. So we're kind of at the higher end. So interestingly, it's 7. 7 hours a week, teachers are going to the internet to search for resources. How many hours do you think teachers are spending creating their own content on average based on the research that Rand and John Hopkins did. 10, 5, 4, 8 to 10, 15, 3, 5, 6. It's like my lottery numbers. Um, so yeah, so I actually you guys are closer on this one. The answer is going to be 5. So if we put those numbers together, we're at 13. 13 hours a week. And that's like when you guys gave me your first numbers, it was kind of a combination, right, of those two topics. That's 2 additional days of work each week. And I don't know about you, but I don't have 2 extra days to put this stuff together. I mean, that's a 7-day work week, and that's kind of problematic for my friends and family who enjoy spending time with me. So, what we want to do is talk about why are teachers feeling the need that they need to spend 13 hours a week either developing their own curriculum or searching the internet for curriculum for their students. So, this approach leaves many educators to rely on trial and error when assessing the effectiveness of the materials that they piece together, and the content across classrooms becomes inconsistent even within the same grade level and in the same school. So, what one teacher's doing down the hallway from somebody else could be completely unrelated from one another. And so, that inconsistency is causing problems in schools and districts. So the research shows that HQIM helps students perform better and it will save teachers time. So what is HQIM? So like why are those things, why is it important? And that's what we want to talk about. Why is HQIM important in order to help students to be successful and to save teachers time? So how does that relate to social studies? So what we've done is we've taken this. There are several states that currently have high quality instructional material evaluations developed at the state level. There are a few states who are currently developing state level HQIM evaluations. And then there are places across the country where the state has not put in has not created rubrics, but that doesn't mean that high quality instructional material rubrics don't exist. They're just not dictated by the state. But what we've done is we've taken all of those state evaluations and some third party evaluations like AIR, and we've put together the 6 common characteristics of HQIM. So, this is where I want to start, that we're all kind of starting on the same platform, in that these are the 6 common characteristics. And even if these don't apply to you in your specific state, they are important in the evaluations that have been created. And so the 6 categories are going to be state standards and frameworks, effective social studies practices, representation and perspective, usability, scaffolding and student support, and formative and summative assessments. So when you look at all the evaluations, all the HQIM evaluations across the country, and you look at some of those third party, these are the common characteristics that they're going to find, that we're going to find. And so now I want to reintroduce you to our panelists to host a discussion and, kind of share their experiences as Jen is a social studies coordinator and middle school instructional coach who has hosted many social studies evaluations, and Dr. Maureen Scanlon from Seminole County, who is a coordinator of instructional projects and has hosted many instructional materials reviews. So thank you guys both for joining me. I really appreciate it. Um, so I'll start with you, Maureen. Can you tell me, um, centered around the state and the state directives of HQIM, how much of your state and your district plays a role in the evaluations in your district? Kind of just
Mhm.
give us your process.
No, it's a great question. So, our state does have a core questions rubric for every core subject adoption that they do. So that's for ELA, math, social studies, and science. And on our Florida Department of Education Instructional Resources page, that's where they post all of those resources. Our state does conduct adoptions, and we're on a 5-year cycle. So every 5 years, they cycle through new core subject areas, and then they also do elective courses and programs as well. How that plays out in our district is we have our school board policy requires us to adopt from the state adoption list. So the state goes through an adoption process and has content specialists review the materials first, and then they open up to stakeholders. So before we even review the materials, our many experts in the content area have reviewed the materials as well as our stakeholders. And then once that state adoption list is published, then we can conduct our district level review. And so the core rubric that they have doesn't really have a scoring system or anything. It's mostly just a list of indicators that they would like to see in the instructional materials. So when we bring that down to our district level, I actually have our committees go through 4 different levels of evaluation. So it's pretty rigorous and intense. I'm very proud that in Seminole County Public Schools, our leadership really values the input of teachers when it comes to selecting the materials they'll use every day in their classroom. So pulling teachers out of our classroom to review materials is probably the only time that they really allow us to pull teachers out because they find it so important. It is essential that our students have high quality instructional materials. So we convene our committees we invite someone from every school to participate depending on the grade level. And then from there, our committees go through 4 different processes. They do a reflection on what their previous instructional materials provided or lacked. We invite publishers in. As you know, Deanna's presented in our district many times, and most of our social studies subjects have chosen TCI products. But we allow our publishers to present to our committee members a 30-minute presentation for every publisher that presents. And that provides us with the ability to do a first impression to reflect on what do we initially think about the programs and what they can provide for our teachers and students. And then we go into a benchmark evaluation. And then the last step is on our final 2 materials that have been selected by the committee. We'll go into a really deep dive using an instructional materials evaluation tool. It's about 8 pages long. It's quite intense. I'm happy to share it with anyone that would like to see it. And through that, we go through some very specific items. We want to focus on pretty much all of the things that you mentioned in the 6 essential high quality instructional materials standards that we want to address. And so through that, we're able to really, really fine tune and see what program is going to support our teachers and students best in Seminole County. Every district is different. Of course, our state statutes heavily guide our process, but within the district, we do have the autonomy to run our procedures how we want to from our committee review. And then another thing that has really helped our district is using EdCredible. I don't know if anyone's heard about that platform, but we're able to put our rubric data into EdCredible and look at pie charts and graphs and notes from the committee members. And it really captures all of the work that the committee members do over several days' time, which allows us to make more logical and less emotional driven decisions. So then we're looking at true data from the rubrics, making sure that the materials are going to help all of our students and all of our teachers, whether they're a first year teacher or an experienced teacher. And we also post all of that information online. We invite stakeholders to complete a rubric and provide input to our committee members. And we do the same thing for every other content teacher at our schools. They're allowed to review the digital materials and provide feedback for our committees. I don't know if I left anything out. That's a lot of information. I'm sorry.
It was a lot of information, but having those 4 layers and having
Mhm.
that detail and, sharing your process will help us frame the rest of the conversation. So, and I'm sure there will be people reaching out to you for some of
Yeah.
that information, but I feel like, having some autonomy within the school, within the district, and of course, one of the most important I feel one of the most important features is bringing in those teachers that
Mhm.
will be using the curriculum is going to be key because we don't want them spending 13 hours a week. You
Right.
want them to have a teacher voice. Um, and because there are so many complexities in social studies, social studies is unique in content area. So, Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about like your process in Blue Valley, which is going to be a little bit different than Maureen's, and your state, um, kind of like what your process is and what that looks like specifically for social studies.
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. Maureen, it's fascinating to hear how the state of Florida works because Kansas is extremely different. So this should be a good spectrum for attendees today. So the Kansas Department of Education, we certainly have state standards in social studies, but our standards are very broad. We have a suggested scope and sequence from the state as to what content is taught at every level. But in Kansas, we really have local school district control. And so for Blue Valley, we control everything from what curriculum is written for each grade level. So I and some colleagues oversee 6 through 12 social studies curriculum writing. And we take the state standards, we take the state scope and sequence, but then we're able to craft that curriculum to meet our community's needs. And then our Board of Education is who approves our curriculum. And everything comes back to our board approved and teacher written curriculum. Then we go out and look for high quality instructional materials that will help teachers teach that curriculum and help students learn that curriculum. So once we get to the point of our curriculum is written, we know what we want all students to know and be able to do. We then go out and start looking for resources that would help us teach that. And then, Maureen, our resource adoption process kind of goes a lot like yours. We have different committees that kind of look on more of a 30,000-foot view, but then we definitely have teacher committees that come in and give it a thorough review process. And then we even tried, in the best case scenario, we even pilot those different programs to see what kind of alignment they have to our district approved curriculum, what kind of student engagement, what kind of teacher usage and ease we see among the classroom before we make those final decisions. But from district to district in Kansas, you will even see different content taught. We do not have state approved curriculum or a list of curriculum resources that the state has approved that then we choose from. It's kind of the other end of autonomy, which
Yeah.
there's good things and bad things about that.
Right. And that's going to be true for everybody that's attending today. They're going to, their process is going, there's going to be good things and bad things. And just having something to provide them some consistency and having a rubric for high quality instructional materials is really going to allow them to communicate, the findings and the curriculum that they're putting in their classrooms. And so you both really went into state standards, which is one of the is the first key element. And so whether your state has a framework or if it has standards, um, I think it was interesting that both of you said, that's kind of where we start. The state is saying this is what we want to be taught. And like you mentioned, Jen, that there in Kansas, you may have different content taught in different school districts within the state. But how do you guys handle if the state, and it's kind of happened in social studies in many states across the country in the last few years, where the standards and frameworks, I know Maryland just adopted their new frameworks like a month ago. I know Oklahoma has, been working on their state frameworks. So how do you guys handle it if your state changes the frameworks or the standards after you've implemented the high quality instructional materials? And Jen, do you mind starting with this one?
Sure. And again, Kansas is just a little bit different because our broad state standards, and you guys, I mean broad. They're really like looking at the NCSS framework. We have 5 state standards. The first one is choices have consequences. Why, yes, they do. Choices do have consequences, but we've got to provide a detailed curriculum to teachers so that we know what we want students to know and learn in that case. We're on a 6-year cycle in Kansas for those standards to be rewritten. And it has been multiple cycles now where those broad standards have stayed the same. Every once in a while, the appendix or the suggested scope and sequence stays in Kansas, but we have not had big left turns or U-turns in Kansas that have changed that. So I have not had to go through like a massive renovation
Mhm.
because state standards have changed.
Okay, nice. And Maureen, what about you?
Well, and again, I'm glad Jennifer explained that we are very different in Florida, and so our standards have changed, and they're really primarily the changes driven by policy, right? So if we have a new governor or a new chancellor of education, we don't have anything written in statute that requires the state to update the standards on a specific timeline, like the adoption cycle. So sometimes it's taken us by surprise, and sometimes it's been well planned out. What I found in my experience when that has occurred is that our publishers tend to work with us very closely on that, and oftentimes will provide some updated resources for our district, which has been wonderful. And then at our district level, we do have content area specialists who help develop our district frameworks, and that provides a lot of guidance for our teachers to be able to navigate the resources that they currently have with the adjustment to the standards. So that's been pretty effective. We do have to certify to the state. Again, we have a lot of oversight in Florida. So we have to
Mhm.
certify to the state annually that our core instructional materials do align to state standards. And so it's really important that if there are changes made, that we're able to identify how we're meeting those standards. But again, our publishers have been great working with our instructional materials programs to provide resources and crosswalks and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. So now let's talk about educational practices. And so every person on this webinar has been in a social studies classroom where the method of teaching was the sage on the stage and had a lecturer. We've all been trying to move away from that and increase student engagement in the classroom through the educational practices. And so when you're meeting with your review committee and you're looking at your HQIM tool, evaluation tool, what are some things that you're asking those reviewers to look for in their social studies educational practices? And Maureen, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. So one of the things that really want to have the teachers focus on is, are research-based practices evident in the instructional materials? That is really important. Again, not to keep bringing this up, but Florida does have a lot of oversight with our instructional in regards to our instructional materials, and so and they have prohibited topics of instruction and things like that. So we have to be careful in selecting materials that the teachers feel very confident in using in the classroom, in their classroom instruction. And so we really tend to focus on what are the best practices today. What are our educational program specialists sharing with us that are the most recent research-based practices, and then we also consult other resources to make sure that those are evident, and that's all part infused in our deep dive rubric in considering those elements.
And Jen, what about you? What are some specific educational practices that you're looking for with your HQIM curriculum?
So we really try to look at 3 different areas. And in Blue Valley, we refer to this is just balanced social studies instruction. So we want instructional materials that help our students learn universal skills of reading, writing, and speaking. So that's the kind of the first part. The second part is we want high quality instructional materials that help students develop social studies skills. So we want students to be sourcing, corroborating evidence, being able to look at those sources and put together an argument with a claim, evidence, and reasoning. So that just those social studies skills, regardless of which social studies content students are learning. The third part of that balanced instruction is the content piece. So if sixth graders are in an ancient world history class, we want that instructional material to be very strong and rich in engaging sixth graders in ancient world history. For a high school government course, we want that instructional material to be very strong in engaging a soon-to-be voter in and a soon-to-be full-fledged, U.S. citizen with all those rights and responsibilities to engage that learner. But that idea of balanced instruction, universal skills, social studies skills, and then the social studies content is really what we're looking for.
Nice, nice. And then Maureen, how do you handle like like having consistency with an HQIM curriculum when you have potentially different needs, but you're using the same tool? And what I mean by that is like Jen was saying, reading and writing and speaking. And so in
Mhm.
elementary school, a kindergarten teacher's needs might be slightly different than like
Mhm.
an econ teacher's needs when it comes to educational practices. Like an econ teacher doesn't want to grade a bunch of writing assignments, and a kindergarten
Mhm.
teacher doesn't necessarily, wants to kind of focus more on those skills. So how do you handle that when you same
Correct. And
evaluation, different needs?
yeah, and it is, and so in most cases, I do use a universal for the final evaluation, the instructional materials evaluation deep dive tool. For K-12 social studies, we use the same rubric for all grade levels. I don't convene adoption committees for K-12 together, so I separate them by in K-5 we do together because we want them to have a consistent program, because that's really important for our students, especially our young students, to have that consistency. And K-5 is probably the most challenging because you have your primary students who really do need those foundational skills. So, how we address that is so the rubric is kind of our base. And then what we do is layer on top of that specific standards for each grade level within that committee. So our kindergarten teachers will be grouped together, our first, second, and so forth. And so each grade level will have specific standards and skills that they need to teach their students, and they'll be looking at the rubric through that lens. It would probably make more sense if you had the rubric in front of you so you could see that, but that's how we've kind of navigated that difference. And then as we get into our middle and high school, where the course content is drastically different, we convene separate committees and again do the same thing. We look at the standards for that specific course and use that as as the kind of the measure for what they would approach the rubric with. So they're looking at those specific course content, skills, and standards.
Great. Okay, so our third educational, our third element of a high quality instructional material for social studies evaluation is representation and perspective. So, Jen, when you hear that term, representation and perspective, how does that translate into high quality instructional material rubric for social studies?
Well, I'm going to steal from one of my educational heroes, Emily Stiles, and use her metaphor of windows and mirrors. We want all of our students in Blue Valley schools to see a reflection of themselves and what they're learning. So we want every student to have that mirror. We also want to provide mirror windows for students where they get to see a window into somebody else's lived experience. So it is extremely important when we are looking at a social studies text, whether it's history, geography, economics, we want multiple perspectives of how a story is told, of what happened in history. We want multiple representations of the same event or of the same economic policy so that students can see the wide array of history that has happened. So this has always been important. I think it has been a heightened importance in the last 7 or 8 years. It continues to be important in my district. I would say in Kansas, we have been lucky. We have not maybe had some of the policy shifts that Florida has had and or other states have had. And we have been able to continue to emphasize that the world is a complicated place. And yet those
Mhm.
windows and mirrors for our students are extremely important.
Yeah. And so, Maureen, because you work with all content areas
Mhm.
and you work with K 12, do
Mhm.
you feel that representation and perspective carries a heavier weight when dealing with social studies compared to maybe like a science or an ELA evaluation?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. And I wanted to share with Jennifer, I do love the Voices and Mirrors. We definitely focus on that in Seminole County as well. Having diverse voices and cultures represented without bias is very important to us. With that being said, on all of our rubrics, we do ask the committee members to consider representation and perspectives, but I think it absolutely has more weight in social studies. In discussions with the committee teachers, you can see that in our social studies committees. It's very, very important for our social studies teachers to ensure that they're able to share multiple different perspectives and voices within their content areas. So I would say it definitely that in science is close behind social studies, but I would say our social studies teachers really value that representation and perspective.
Okay. So let's talk about usability. To me, this is kind of a broad term. And so I think if we can kind of bring it in and make it a little bit more specific. So we'll start with you, Maureen. What do you think about, or what does it mean to you? Can you explain what usability looks like on a high quality instructional material evaluation for you guys?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of things that we consider on the front end before our teachers even review an instructional material program. We make sure that the usability is going to be there with integration into our student learning system. So we want to make sure that the digital content is going to be able to be used easily by both teachers and students. And then that they also have parent supports involved in that as well, because our parents are increasingly more involved, and we love that, and we want them to be able to have insight and transparency into the curriculum that we're using in our district. And then when the teachers are actually evaluating their material, we ask them to consider the usability for all of our students. They need to consider our ELL students, our ESE students, our high performing students, our students who are still struggling to learn on grade level. So we need to make sure all of those things are included in a program, which is a big ask, but it's really important. And then is the program presented in a logical way? Is the pacing logical in line with when you're considering looking at our state academic standards and the learning outcomes that are expected of our students? Can the program be used by a first year teacher who just walks into a classroom without a lot of support? And can it also be used by a really high flying experienced teacher who's been teaching for 25, 30 years? Will they both find value in the program? So that's why we try to make sure that our committee has a diverse selection of teachers on it so that we can capture both ends of the spectrum on that. And then, of course, making sure that the activities for the students to learn the content are engaging and require them to do a lot of different types of work, collaboration, research, learning how to write well, and do all of the things that we expect them to do as social studies learners.
Nice. And Jen, did you have anything to add? Is usability interpreted a little bit different in your district, or is it pretty similar?
I would really echo much of what Maureen said. I do think the tech side of digital resources has really increased in the last 5 or 6 years. And that, the ability for a resource to integrate with our learning management system, for there to be a strong tech support on the other end if we have issues, for us to have a dedicated tech support from the resource, is extremely important, and certainly something we consider when we are selecting a resource. Because if teachers and students can't access the digital part of the resource, you're only going to do that so much before you're like, well, I'm not going to try that again. I
Mhm.
was all teed up, nothing worked, and I've got to have a backup plan, and that's too much for teachers as well. So all of the scaffolding that Maureen described is also important. Very lucky in my district that we have a strong tech support system too, who can do some of the checks for us. But we've really had to dedicate human resources to that portion of our selection of high quality instructional materials, because it's just too important to not have that strong tech product, but also then the strong tech support behind it.
So are you saying that you at your district level, you have some experts, some tech experts that come in and say you kind of do a checklist so that like it meets what I we need it to do. It can do what we want it to do. Now let's go ahead and let's have the teachers evaluate it. And you're both
Yes,
nodding your head, so I'm assuming you both have district support at that level.
yes, we have minimum tech requirements that any product or any resource has to meet for us to even consider them.
And Maureen, you're nodding, and so that is true for you guys as well.
Yes, absolutely. Prior to any adoption, we have a designated integration specialist. So I meet with him and his team, and we go over all of the materials, and they fill out a pre tech form for me. All of the publishers who are submitting to be considered for district adoption in our district have to fill out some paperwork prior to being selected to participate. And one of those is the tech piece. So we have them fill out that.
Nice. And so, Jen, I want to jump back to something you said a second ago because you said like the tech component has really kind of become more prevalent in the last 6 years, 6 or 7 years, I think is what you said. So, are you finding? And I think that everybody attending today can agree that 5 years ago, like it was all tech, right? We were all at home, and we really needed tech, and we needed
Mhm.
to have usability. Have you either of you, and I'll start with Jen and then Maureen, but have either of you seen kind of the pendulum starting to swing back the other way where it's less technology and more paper pencil in the classrooms at all?
I do think that pendulum is swinging back while students are in school. We Any adoption we make, we might have the digital resource and digital version, but we also have classroom sets of hardback textbooks, um, resources that are printable if necessary for students. And I think a lot of teachers are going back to while we are in school, we are going to use printed text materials and hold a pencil in our hand. Not that they might not be using and interacting with the digital resource at home or at certain parts of the lesson, but I do think we're seeing that move back. And I just think there's a lot of research out there to support that. Um, I think it's important to have robust text and digital resources and platforms that support teaching and learning, but I don't think 612 students are ready to completely get rid of the paper, pencil, hard copy portion of learning. I don't know if we have built teachers' ability to really blend learning the way we want blended learning to work. And so we've had to kind of swing that pendulum back a little bit.
Maureen, what about you guys? Have you noticed that at all, or not too much?
I mean, I think we've consistently in our superintendent convenes student focus groups, and one of the things our students have consistently stated is that they prefer print resources as opposed to digital resources, which is a little surprising, I would think, but that's what they've consistently told us. We are not a one-to-one school district like some of our other Florida school districts are. So
Mhm.
we have always prioritized making sure that we have a really high quality print resource that can be complemented by the digital, because some of our teachers, it varies from school to school. Some of our teachers have class sets of computers, but others don't. So they would need lab time in order to be able to access the digital. And a lot of times they'll use it for reinforcement and homework at home. And now that cell phones are restricted or prohibited by state statute in Florida classrooms for student use, it makes it more challenging for students who don't have another alternative device to use to access those digital materials during class time. So I think we've seen that focus in reliance on print materials for quite a while in Seminole County.
And so the usability in terms of HQIM when you're doing your evaluation would need to be the usability of the tech component, but then also the print component. Can you
Mhm.
use it in your classroom? Is it high quality? Is there engagement in? Okay, so interesting. I actually, I've looked at this presentation many times, and this is the first time I'm kind of putting those puzzle
Mhm.
pieces together because I think that that really is important to set the kids up for success no matter what their situation is.
Mhm.
Um, so I love it. All right, let's talk about scaffolding. When we look at scaffolding, some people call it spiral curriculum, or some people do like a ladder analogy. But what when you talk to your reviewers about scaffolding for social studies, how do you explain to them about scaffolding? Because it's not like math, right? Because math, you need one skill to build on the next skill. But for social studies, that may not necessarily be true. So, Maureen, tell me what you explain to your teachers about scaffolding in terms of
I
HQIM.
I think, and I'll let Jennifer, as a content area specialist, definitely can probably go more in depth on this than I can. But when I'm working with our teachers, one of the things that we focus on, and that they have as a big challenge, is our students accessing high level text, primary source material. That I think that the content is more challenging to access for students in social studies than most other subject areas, because you're looking at so many primary source documents, and they really have to be able to access that high level text. So when we're approaching the review, we're looking at, are there supports in place to ensure that all of our diverse learners can access the content. So I think that that's the biggest struggle we have. So we really focus a lot on that, and what supports are in place to help all of our varying learners.
Okay. And Jen?
Yes, again, I'll echo a lot of what Maureen said. It's extremely important for us to think about how all students in our classroom have access to that grade level standard and the rigor of the grade level standard. So our perspective is to really think about what supports or scaffolds are maybe built within the instructional materials that help all students access that grade level standard. So it might be graphic organizers to help students understand a reading. It might be suggesting a second or third read of a complex text like a primary source. But we want the instructional part and the instructional suggestions in that resource to provide teachers with the scaffolding needed to, again, give all students access to that state standard, and that grade level standard. And I think this is really where the difference between an instructional material and a high quality instructional material comes in. If we were to do a survey of a high school US history class or history book, we're going to see that the history written by wonderful authors in many of the same ways. But the instructional supports that are built within a high quality instructional material are going to be different. And we're really looking for those resources that have meaningful, rigorous supports so that, again, all of our students can hit that grade level standard. I think one more thing, because I know we may be getting close on time. I think one of the biggest things we look for is who is doing the work when students are learning and when teachers are teaching. Because I think
Mhm.
a high quality instructional material supports the teacher, but the students are doing the work.
Nice.
Because if
Yes.
the students are doing the work, the students are learning. If the
Yes.
teacher's the one doing the work, I don't know how much the kids are learning in some ways. So that's one of our just kind of big, we don't necessarily have that on a rubric necessarily, but
Mhm.
thinking about the rigor and the scaffolds so that the students are doing the work.
I'm gonna steal that and pretend like it was my idea, and will deny it if anybody, pushes back on that. No, but I think that that's a great way to describe it, and I know, professional development was mentioned a minute ago, and it was, brought up in the chat. L but I do think with social studies and those skills, and having those materials in your classroom, supporting the teachers and supporting the students are going to set them both up for success. And I think we're fine on time. If you give social studies teachers an hour, we'll take an hour and a half. So, but I will keep us on tack. So you go ahead and say anything you need to say, and I'll speed up my stuff at the end. So,
Okay.
um, really, our participants are here for your expertise. So please don't feel we have plenty of time. And so the last thing actually is we're on our last characteristic, our last essential element of high quality instruction materials, which are formative and summative assessments. So when you hear like about formative and summative assessments, Maureen, I'll start with you. Like, I guess the priorities. What is a priority for a formative and summative assessment through the lens of a teacher? Like, what are they looking for in HQIM that's formative and summative?
I think the biggest thing that I have heard from our K-12 teachers is first they want formative and summative assessments that are editable and adaptable. So if a program has um, formative and summative assessments, they want to make sure that they're able to take those and align them to the targeted learning outcomes for whatever the teacher may be working on. And then also they look at it as kind of a bridge between what they're doing in their classroom in monitoring their students' learning towards the state academic standards and also towards the benchmark and state assessments. So the goal
Mhm.
is you want to make sure that the students are able to master the standards so they can perform well on the state assessments. But they need some practical ways to do that throughout the course of the year to ensure their students are on meeting those grade level standards and that they're able to teach and reteach and identify quickly what standards their students may not be mastering or successful
Mhm.
on and quickly be able to go back and provide more work and experiences with that content so the students can be successful. So that's what we really, really focus on and looking for that bridge between our local and state.
Okay. And Jen?
Yeah, so when we think about assessment, we kind of come back to that idea of balanced instruction again and think
Mhm.
about balanced assessment. So we want there to be opportunities for students to be assessed on their reading, speaking, and writing. We want students there to be formative and summative opportunities for them to be assessed on their social studies skills. And
Mhm.
then we want there to be definitely some robust formative and summative assessments on the content they're learning. If we're spending 6 weeks learning about Egypt, we need to know what we want all students to know and be able to do about Egypt at the end of those 6 weeks. So thinking about the balanced social studies instruction, and then also, does that instruction pull back and correlate to, for us, our district approved curriculum documents? What we want
Mhm.
all students to know and be able to do that, again, are aligned with our very broad state standards. um, but again, we really want that balanced social studies assessment along with that balanced instruction.
Okay. So there's a common saying, you may have all have heard it, where it says, teachers differentiate their lessons, but states standardize assessments. How do you have high quality instruction material that supports both of those scenarios? I'm sorry, Maureen, let's start with you.
Of course. So I think it goes back to a lot of what Jennifer and I were just speaking about is making sure that there's a variety of tools to monitor and assess your students. And that also some of they're engaging and exciting for students. We want students to enjoy learning.
Mhm.
So we know that sometimes we're required to do a lot of state assessments. I mean, we have quarterly assessments that we give to our students in Florida, or three assessments we give to our students in Florida prior to their final assessment. And so we want to make sure that like Jennifer said, we are providing that balance throughout their instruction, but also keeping in mind what our learning outcomes are. What do we expect the students to learn, and do those align with that? And do our teachers have the ability to edit and adapt them to meet the needs of their varying learners in their classroom?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, and I think you said this before, Deanna, is that um, no matter how high quality the instructional material is, it's not going to replace the teacher in the classroom. That is the
Mhm.
person that brings the magic and makes it happen for our learners. So as long as they have the ability to make sure it works for their unique learners in their classroom, that's gonna help us make sure that we meet our goals.
Excellent. And Jen, you get the last word.
And I think this is a really important question. I think this goes back a little bit to my last answer, but this idea that every student should have access to a grade level standard, and the scaffold is there to help reach to that grade level standard. It's not there to limit the rigor that a student is learning or being asked to learn. And I think that's sometimes where we get it wrong in the classroom. We think the scaffold is there to make it easier or to take the rigor away, whereas the scaffold is there to help the student reach that grade level standard, even if they might not be there yet. Oftentimes, I think our state assessment scores don't match up what we're seeing in the classroom because we've removed some of the rigor of what we
Mm,
ask students to do in the classroom
yeah.
versus what the state is asking us to do on that assessment. So the scaffold is there to support the attainment of that grade level standard, not to diminish the rigor um, along the way.
Well, excellent, excellent. So stick with me. I've got about a few more things that I want to share with all of the participants today, and then I want to give you a big, huge thank you to both of you for dedicating some time to this. It's a new topic for social studies to have an evaluation for our unique content area. So, a couple of things that I want to make sure that we hit home is that teachers are supported with access to rigor and reliable grade level content. Students engage deeper and more meaningful ways with state standards, and student outcomes improve. And that's why HQIM evaluations are so important. HQIM is so important, is it helps students perform better and it saves teachers time. So we want to make sure that improving student outcome, promoting deeper engagement, saving teachers time is all the things that it does. But what it does not do is just like what Maureen said, is it does not replace the teacher expertise in the classroom. You are why students are coming to school. You are the person that is going to ignite their passion for social studies. So you want to have high quality instructional materials that support both you and your students. So when we look at these 6 elements, state standards, effective social studies practices, representation, perspective, usability, scaffolding for student support, and formative and summative assessments. If you want to find out additional information, if you have your phone, if you want to grab your phone's camera and scan this QR code, this high quality instruction materials for social studies booklet. It's an e-booklet. Um, we'll go over the importance of HQIM materials. It will build civic competence and literacy skills through social studies, defining HQIM in social studies, the impact of HQIM on student achievement, how to select HQIM for social studies, and TCI approach, setting the standards for high quality social studies materials. So, some of the research that I used in the earlier part of the presentation will be found in this booklet. So, I'll leave it up here for just a few seconds. And it looks like the EdWeb team, thank you so much, posted the link in chat. Also, it's beyond the box. It's not just about high quality instruction materials, but that you will have better success for keys to success for implementation when your district supports professional development for teachers, that there's stakeholders communication, there's phased implementation, technology infrastructure, and ongoing support for sustainability. So, beyond the box keys to successful implementation. So, here at TCI, we partner with teachers to create classrooms where every student thrives with programs built by educators for educators to inspire inquiry, critical thinking, and exploration. If you haven't heard of TCI before, we are amazing and in thousands of classrooms across the country because we have active inquiry based learning with hands on activities and interactive videos and inquiry, engaging print and digital resources, and we seamlessly integrate technology with hands on learning through flexible, easy to use tools. We have ongoing support at every step. We started as a staff development company and we continue with our professional development with online courses, teaching strategies, and learning communities. So please make sure, oh, and we do all that through our 6 powerful teaching strategies that are based on 5 educational theorists. If you download that ebook, you will find out about our 6 strategies and our 5 theorists within the TCI approach. So please make sure to follow us on socials at on Facebook at Teach TCI and Insta at Teach underscore TCI. If you want to experience a TCI lesson, it's a free lesson. You want to scan the black QR code that'll give you access to 100% of all the materials for a TCI lesson. And if you're interested in signing up for our newsletter and staying informed, you want to make sure to scan that purple QR code. I'll leave that up there. Oh, and the EdWeb team put that on the chat as well. So I want to take this opportunity and give a huge round of applause to Dr. Maureen Scanlon from Seminole County and Jennifer Smith from Blue Valley. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. I really, really appreciate your time, your experience, and you sharing all of that with us today. You are amazing. It is now 5 o'clock. So thank all of you who've dedicated an hour of your day to join us in this HQIM instruction materials for deeper learning in social studies webinar. Thank you so much, you guys.